You cannot stay in a job that makes you miserable. It is your life. You only have one life. Don't spend your whole life just doing what you think other people expect of you. Money is not the end all be all. There's so many more important things. I don't think we need to sacrifice everything, our whole entire being, just for money. How to know if you should quit. This is a big decision and it's important to know whether or not you're making the right decision. So let's dive straight into it. So the first thing I would recommend if you're thinking about quitting is to write a pros and cons list, to actually put some thought into it. What is keeping you there? What other things going for that job? And what other things that make you consider leaving? If the only reasons why you're staying are for money, because you're getting paid well, or if you're worried about what other people may think of you, or you worry about your career and you worry about, will this look awful on my CV, you should really consider leaving, because I don't really think any of those are good reasons to stay. What most of these points have in common, that you're basically doing it for others and you're doing it because you're worried about what other people think or how other people perceive you. It is important to really look internally what you want to do, because you cannot stay in a job that makes you miserable for the rest of your life. It is your life. You only have one life. Don't spend your whole life just doing what you think other people expect of you. If you pivot your mindset and focus on what you like to do and maybe find a career that works better for you and become successful in that, then other people will see that you were right. Not that their opinion should really matter anyway, but I think something that you can be consistent in and thrive in is always going to be better for the long run. Then on the other side of the pros and cons list, if some of your cons for the job are mental health or physically health related, then it may also be time to quit. Some mental health issues to look out for are anxiety. So if you're worried about going to your job every day, that is a little bit of a warning sign that something is up. I think some anxiety is normal, especially on a Sunday just before the week. But if it's getting really bad and kind of chronic and you have it every day while at work, you really need to assess the situation and try to find out what is causing you that anxiety. And I do think it is a good time to leave if your anxiety has become really chronic and if it develops into panic attacks. Another big reason to leave is if you develop depression or burnout, and they are somewhat similar. Burnout is a form of depression. If you experience burnout or the start of it, you really need to reassess the situation. I think you don't necessarily always have to quit. I think the first step can be to open up to your company, maybe even to HR, and see if there's anything that can be done. And maybe if you catch it early enough, you can maybe find a place to go to therapy and help you through things. But I think if you leave it too late, more often than not, the only thing you can really do is to quit in order to refocus. Once you've gone down that path too far, it's really hard to recover from it in a job that's draining all your energy. So I think in order to recover from a burnout, you really need to just focus on finding yourself again, and then you can kind of start again. And I think that is really, really hard if your job is not really supporting you, or if you just have to continue to work and continue to do the thing that is causing you to burn out. Some of the symptoms of burnout include fatigue, especially when it's chronic and you're just tired all the time. This one, to be fair, doesn't really apply to me. I'm just a naturally tired person anyway. It is important to see, is there a little bit of a shift to what you were normally like before you started that job? Do you feel more tired? Do you feel more exhausted? Some other symptoms include being apathetic, getting headaches, and being cynical. And for me, I really noticed sort of a shift in the person that I was becoming. I was seeing everything really, really negatively. And I was looking at other people's lives, especially people that didn't have a 9 to 5, so that were self-employed, and I would really envy them. And I would really think, oh, they must have it so easy, which obviously they don't really. But I think I was just in such a deep burnout and depression state that I would just think, oh, other people have it so much easier than me. And I normally never ever think like that. And I'm actually really glad that I got out of this thinking spiral really quickly, because I think I just felt so trapped, and I just thought, this is what I just have to do for the rest of my life, and I basically just have to be depressed for the rest of my life and be on this hamster wheel. But you honestly don't have to. Don't feel like you have to. I think if you're getting to the point of feeling like that, that is also a really good sign to leave. I think that for me was a really big sign. I sort of became a person that I didn't really recognize and that I didn't really like. And I was just thinking, why is this job making me so cynical about life? Like, I think it's not really worth it to stay in something that is making you so miserable. So definitely consider leaving if you just feel like your mental health is impacted in a way that you don't even recognize yourself. It's always important to have a positive outlook on life while you still can. I think there's always a way around things. I don't think you need to stay in something. I think you need to try and get out there and try to improve your happiness. I think the point where you kind of stop fighting for feeling happy, that is so sad, and I don't think anyone should really get to that point. Try to fight for your happiness, try to fight for what you believed in, try to fight for your dreams that you had as a child. Do not give up just because you're unhappy right now. Also, I found that I put so much energy into my job and doing the work for someone else, and I thought, why don't I try to put all the energy that I put into this job into something for myself, or at least part of the energy. And while I was doing my 9 to 5, I couldn't put any energy into something that I would just do for myself. But I think it's super important to, outside of your job, be able to work on some of your hopes and dreams, something that's just for you. And if you feel like you don't have the energy to do that in a 9 to 5, then think of maybe reducing your hours or doing something part-time. So I think you need that balance. Otherwise, you're just gonna burn out. It's kind of inevitable. I think sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it takes shorter, and sometimes it's also specific personalities that burn out quicker. For example, I discovered that I'm highly sensitive. I take stress from others and I get kind of overstimulated, especially in stressful environments. And I think it's really important trying to figure out who you are so that you can find the right environment for yourself. So how do you avoid burnout? It's okay to say no sometimes, or to say that you will just simply take longer with the task. I think you have to put up some boundaries, put yourself first. Don't just say yes to everything, even though everything internally is screaming no. If someone is putting too much workload on you, just try and be sensible and try and say, I can't really take on anymore, but I will get to this once I'm finished with what I'm doing at the moment. Just little things like that. Take a little bit of your power back. Another way to avoid burnout is to really focus on your personal time being your personal time. Try to turn off Teams when your work ends and just really have the evenings and the weekends for yourself and just relax and recharge, and try not to think about work. And ideally also try to just do something for yourself, something that's maybe completely different from your work, so that you can just recharge, because it's so important to have a work-life balance. You can't continue performing well at your work if you don't take care of yourself outside of work. Also, if you realize that things are just too much for you, then reduce your hours if you can, and if not, then maybe it's time to quit and try to find something that has less hours. You can do a little bit of research before you quit. It doesn't necessarily even have to be in the industry that you worked in before. Another really big reason to quit your job is when you get physical health symptoms, especially when they become chronic, or when they just start to appear more often than they did before. A lot of the time, those physical symptoms could be psychosomatic. So it's good to maybe do a little bit of an evaluation of yourself. Do those symptoms become slightly better when you're on holiday or on the weekends? Then it's very, very likely that they're stress induced and that they're psychosomatic. But obviously this is not medical advice, and speak to a doctor because it might actually be a health condition that you're experiencing. But I think we underestimate kind of the impact that stress can have on our body and how it can really make us have physical symptoms. I had loads of physical symptoms before I left my job. I do believe that everyone should take it seriously if their health is impacted, because you don't know if things could become chronic. And I think you really need to listen to your body. Your body is telling you something. And I'm actually kind of glad my body reacted that way, because I think otherwise I would have stayed longer and sort of sacrificed my mental health. I actually used to be really mad at getting those symptoms, and I'd be like, why can't I be normal like everyone else? No one else seems to be having these issues, which I don't think is true anyway. I think a lot of people struggle but don't actually admit to them that it's because of the stress and because of the job. But now the way I see it, I'm actually really grateful that my body just showed me these are your boundaries. Listen to your body. To be honest, I think this sort of 9 to 5 and hustle culture, the stress that we experience in the 21st century is really not natural. We still have the same sort of DNA and genetics that we used to thousands of years ago, where we would just be hunter and gatherers. Our fight or flight response still works the same way. So an environment where you experience stress every day is not good for us. Chronic stress is just not good for us. A big thing you should consider as well is, what is the worst thing that would happen if you quit? Would you have to move back in with your parents? Try to imagine that scenario and try to be realistic as well. Is that something you would be able to deal with? And if the answer is yes, then I would say it's definitely time to quit. It might be the case that after you quit, this scenario will happen, but a lot of the times it won't. But even if it does and you're prepared for it and you're happy with it for a short while, then I think just quit, regroup, then you can always move on to your next job. But if it's not something you can live with, then try to think of ways to maybe avoid that scenario. Maybe after you quit, what you could do is do a part-time job, or already have that lined up before you quit and just cover your basic living expenses. Maybe that is something you could do for a short while you kind of recover, and then after a few months or maybe a year or however long it takes you to recover, you could then look at jobs again if you, for example, don't want to necessarily move back in with your parents. I think there's always ways around it, and you just need to consider, where do I sacrifice? What am I willing to do and what am I not willing to do? So moving on to some solutions. If you know that you're burnt out and that you're not happy, then try to open up to people at your job and see if that comes with any kind of improvement. Maybe set yourself a deadline, say 3 months or however much you can bear, maybe 2 months, and see if there's any improvement. And if there's no improvement or very little improvement, then I would say it's time to quit. I think what I started doing was I was setting myself some deadlines. I would think, oh, I'll just wait out 2 more months and see if things get better. And after those 2 months came around, I'd just be like, maybe things will get better in another 3 months. Maybe I just need to give it some more time. And I did that several times. And then by the end of it, I just realized, why do I kind of keep extending that deadline? Things haven't gotten better. What am I waiting on? I need to just leave. In a relationship, would you give someone that many chances if they just kind of keep disappointing you and keep not wanting to change? Jobs are a two-way street. You need to give something and they need to give you something back. But if you're giving everything and you're not getting anything back in return, then isn't that just a toxic environment? Or am I just a little bit naive about the situation? A lot of the time, we just stay in toxic jobs for the money, and I think we accept a lot more toxicity than we would in, let's say, friends or a relationship, for example. Why is that? It's solely just for the money, and is that really worth it? Sometimes we don't need as much as we think we need. Money is not the end all be all. There's so many more important things, and I don't think we need to sacrifice everything, our whole entire being, just for money. And that has led me into really practical solutions. So one big thing I did was save. So the last 5 months, and to be honest, kind of the whole time during my job, I would save, especially the past 5 months. I would just try to save everything I could in order to save up a minimum of 6 months of living expenses and basic needs. Because after you quit, just take some time. The longer you kind of bought yourself freedom to look for a job, the better. I think a lot of people get into debt and buy themselves a car or a phone that they can't afford, and that is keeping them in a job that makes them unhappy. So try not to get into debt if you can. Try not to use a credit card or get into credit card debt. By the way, I'm probably saying debt really wrong. That is really hard for me to say that. That will keep you free and not tied into a job that you then need in order to pay something off. So I always buy my phones, my TV, my car, everything outright. And I luckily don't really have any expenses like pets or kids at the moment, so I can't really touch on that. Freedom is really, really important to me, and quitting any time I like is really important to me. If it is to you as well, then try really hard to save as much as you can and to not buy anything that you can't afford. In order to save, another tip I would give you is to really reduce your living expenses and really live below what you can afford so that you can save as much as possible. What I did is I actually moved out of the city just because rents were getting so expensive. Something I've touched on before is you could potentially just do a part-time job and really reduce your hours after you've quit. That might be all you need to get over that burnout, and you could just do that maybe for a year, or you could give yourself a time limit and then you could get back into the industry that you worked in before, if that is what you desire. I think just having a part-time job takes the pressure out of things a little bit, and it gives you free time to have a bit more of a work-life balance and to work on yourself. And when you start to learn about yourself, and when you start accepting yourself and accepting who you are, then you can find something that works better for you. I think especially for people with ADHD, autism, or people that are highly sensitive, a 9 to 5 might not necessarily be the right thing. Sitting in an office being around a lot of noise might not necessarily be the right thing. It is important to just do the research and really do internal work and really think, what would you actually enjoy? What would maybe play into your strengths? For example, working with animals is a great idea, or any job where you can reduce that stress level. And then the last solution I want to touch up on is try to find something that you enjoy. Do a side hustle, do something for yourself. It's definitely great to start that while you're working, but if you just really don't have the energy, then don't worry and just start it after you've quit. And as I said before, maybe just do something part-time and kind of be realistic with your energy levels, because I think there's no point trying to hustle along a 9 to 5 if you're completely exhausted anyway. I think in general it's always good to not be dependent on just one income source, because you never know what might happen. So it's good to just set something else up on the side. What has helped me a lot is to save and invest a lot of that money as well, because that gives you a sense of security. And I would say try to invest it safely. You can do a lot of research about investing. It's actually quite easy once you wrap your head around it, and there are great videos on YouTube, it is definitely great to invest, because that has helped me so much, kind of becoming a bit more financially independent and not just relying on my 9 to 5. Having that as a little bit of a safety net has definitely helped in my decision to quit. So yeah, that was it for this video. Let me know what you think of this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope there were some helpful tips in this video. I will see you very soon with another video. Goodbye.